We're live, and I'm still sorry. I'm obsessed with looking at this thing that I would love to talk about, but it's sort of off topic. And God, go follow. You can go to my Twitter. You can see I just retweeted something. It's crazy. Anyway, welcome to Healthcare Triage Live. Thank you very much for tuning in. We've had a couple weeks off because people have been traveling or on vacation or things like that. But let's start with our housekeeping real quick. As always, check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/HCTriage or Healthcare Triage. I don't have my stuff up right now. Facebook.com/let's say Healthcare Triage, because that's what I'm going to assume it is. HCT merch. That's all good. Oh, all the stuff's on screen. I don't even have to say it. Check out the Patreon. Check out the the Facebook. Check out the Reddit. Check out everything we are. We really appreciate your support. We're starting late. Let's launch right in. Terrence Foster asks, can you discuss MS and how it relates to age? Is the cutoff really 50? What are the chances of developing MS later in life? Multiple sclerosis is a disease where there's a problem with the myelin sheath of the nerves, and as it is attacked, and as it is hurt, you have trouble transmitting nervous signals. The symptoms can show up as almost any kind of nervous issue. Pain, difficulty controlling muscles, difficulty vision. I mean, anything that involves the nervous system, it can show up as. There's multiple types. If you watch The West Wing, you get a whole, education on it, relapsing, remitting, multiple sclerosis, all kinds of stuff. President Bartlett had it. You ask, is the cutoff really 50? I guess you're asking, in other words, if somebody gets past 50, are they not going to get multiple sclerosis? I don't know that there's any hard age like that at which you would say they don't have it. I bet most of the diagnoses are made before the age of 50, the vast majority, but I don't know if there is such a thing as like a cutoff, as if what you're asking. So the chances of developing MS later in life are lower, certainly. The further out you get, the less likely you're going to have what would be classified as MS. Although it's sort of irrelevant. I mean, we classify it as MS because of the way it looks like on scans. It's the way that the sheaths look like. You get the multiple sclerosis. The chances are less later in life, but I wouldn't say zero. I wouldn't. So I don't think there's a cutoff like that day at 50. So hopefully that answers your question. Jonathan Galeta, how effective is the HBV vaccine, which we figured out was hepatitis B? Because I swear to God, when I first looked at this, I was like, HBV? I don't even know what that is. My doctor said I do not have antibodies for it and said I could choose to take it. What are the risk benefits of it? You're not going to have antibodies to it unless you've had hepatitis. So, yeah, I mean, I would get the HBV. I would get the hepatitis B vaccine. That's a universal vaccine. We give it to all babies now. Almost no reason not to. Terrible disease. Why would you want to take a chance? I'm pro-vaccine. I would say you choose to take it. I mean, lots of places will require it. Schools, I think, require it. So it's like, or at least I think they do. So it's incredibly effective. It works very, very well, and you should have it. And there you go. James Craver, I'm getting married in January. Congratulations. And we're looking for options for short-term birth control, less than a year. What would be a good option? I mean, anything but an IUD. I mean, even then you could get let me take that back. Anything but sterilization. Don't tie your tubes. Don't get a vasectomy. You could put an IUD in for a year. Most people would not. I mean, condoms, the pill, Norplant, the injection, the thing, the implant. All of it's great. Anything's better than nothing. Of course, always remember the condoms are the only thing that's really going to protect you from sexually transmitted diseases. So if that's what you're asking, you should always have condoms. But less than a year is more than, when people say short-term birth control, usually they're thinking like the act, like condom. You're talking about a year, almost anything, other than, again, something permanent. So definitely talk to your doctor, and the person you're getting married to should talk to their doctor. And you should have many options, and you should choose whatever's best for you. Santosh Bodhu, is high waist to hip ratio really more dangerous than high BMI? Yeah, I mean, high hip to waist ratio, what you're trying to get at that point is high waist to hip ratio. What you're worried about then is, people think that, the fat that you collect around here is worse than sort of the fat that you might collect elsewhere. So if you're collecting all your fat here, which gives you a high waist to hip ratio, that might be more concerning for the future. Of course, that's also going to get picked up in a higher BMI. You're talking at that point like statistically significant, but probably not clinically significant. It is all about, showing you associations with poorer cardiovascular or other outcomes. A high BMI is going to be associated with those, as is a high waist to hip ratio. I probably would not spend time obsessing about one versus the other and trying to get to sort of where you are. So I really wouldn't, when you say really more dangerous, I wouldn't get that hung up on it. Neither is good, but neither is also going to be a monster change in your absolute value or absolute risk, unless you're talking about a really, really abnormal level of either. Wayne Huang, of all the previous different healthcare systems you've discussed, which country's system or combination do you think is the best, or the one that you would like to see the U.S. adopt if possible? We get this question all the time. They all have their pros and cons, and first of all, let me say clearly, the U.S. is going to adopt none of them because it's just not going to happen. And so, asking this kind of question is always sort of like, if you had your dream world, if I was king of the world, what I would do, but it's not terribly realistic. Having said that, if I'm forced to choose one that I think is the one that sort of does best in the metrics that matter to me, I think France is pretty good. Single payer system underlaying a private system on top. It does very good access, very good quality. The knock against it is that it is high in cost compared to everywhere but, of course, the United States. But, I favor spending money to get quality and access. So that's probably where I would go. They have a lot of perks that are amazing, too. I also think Singapore's is fascinating. We've talked about that multiple times, too. I don't think it's necessarily as good, perhaps, in the outcomes that matter to me, but it is also a very interesting system with a lot going for it that could be tinkered with as well. That would be on the more like consumer-directed healthcare side, while France is more on the government mandatey side. Both are very, very interesting. We have videos on both. You should go watch them. And all the other international healthcare system videos. Mr. Kizza, 670. I was born with Pectus excavatum at 15. I had the NUS procedure. Before the operation, I had bronchitis all the time, but haven't been sick since. Does Pectus excavatum have negative health effects? Yeah. So many of those questions are maybe. So Pectus excavatum is when you're born with sort of this defect where your chest sort of caves in as opposed to sort of being out. There are various procedures that can correct this. It is debatable whether there are really any long-term effects from the Pectus excavatum in terms of cardiac problems or breathing problems or anything else. It is also debatable whether the procedures wind up making a difference in overall clinical outcomes. For instance, the thing you're asking about bronchitis, I can't tell you, bronchitis is almost a disease that does not exist in children. It's one of those myths that I railed in. In fact, one of the biggest arguments I had in residency, you can find textbooks which just say there is no such thing as bronchitis in children. Or pretty much like that it really isn't there. Bronchiolitis exists, but we often call colds bronchitis, and therefore it gives us the ability to treat them with antibiotics. It almost never, ever, ever happens in kids. So the fact that they diagnose you with bronchitis all the time would be the first thing I'd be like, really? Maybe you had colds. Maybe you had other things. I don't know. Maybe you did have bronchitis. Maybe you're the rare instance. I don't know. But there's not a lot of great evidence to say that Pectus excavatum would lead to those kinds of negative problems to begin with, or that the procedures would correct it. However, for cosmetic reasons and for lots of other reasons, lots of people do the procedures and they're very happy with the results. And I think you should too. Your doctors probably know your care better than I do, I'm going to assume. And so they obviously made choices with you that was best for you. But again, not real clear that there are any long-term health effects. So I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about it. But of course, always ask your doctor to get health information about you. Gemma Olemacher, is there any medical justification for orthodontia, or is it cosmetic? There are instances when it is medically justified. If your jaw is misaligned or if your teeth are going to have problems, it can lead to jaw pain or things like that. But I would imagine that a lot of orthodontia is for cosmetic reasons. I got braces, for instance, when I was like 30. And that's finally when I got around to fixing my teeth. And they wanted to do surgery, and I laughed and said, that ain't happening. And so they wound up pulling some teeth and then moving some teeth around. And it's amazing what they can do. And they tried to tell me it was for health reasons, but I believe deep in my heart it was for cosmetic reasons. That's why I was doing it. not because I was worried about it. But that doesn't mean that there are no justifications for orthodontia. There probably absolutely are, but I would best bet that those are in the minority. And now I'm going to get a lot of orthodontists probably screaming at me that I'm wrong. And if that is the case, I will admit it publicly, both here on Healthcare Triage and on my Twitter. And I look forward to hearing about that. AZ, is the barefoot running technique better than the traditional running technique where you land on your heels? C, and you give me a long link here. So much debate about this, including amongst my close personal friends, some of whom wear those like socks with the toesy thingies so that you feel like you're running barefoot even when you're not. Did I say socks? Because I meant like shoes. It's those shoes with the toesy thingies. So you'll get a lot of people arguing about this too with no evidence. It is true that probably one of the biggest reasons we wear shoes is to protect our feet. Not necessarily because it gives us better posture or anything else. It is probably true that we would all be fine walking or running around in bare feet, but that we wear shoes so we don't scratch or step on pointy thingies and have problems and stuff like that. Having said that, I don't think there's a ton of evidence that says that walking around in shoes is bad for us. Or, of course, I'm not talking about high heels, which I don't understand how anyone walks around in those. I'm talking about just shoes, running shoes. Now, there are probably better or worse running techniques, especially like landing on your feet or your heels or anything else, but that's not necessarily hampered by having bare feet. So I don't think there's a lot of good evidence to say that any one of these techniques is better or worse than others. There's probably a lot of anecdotal evidence. I will have to look at that website that you linked me to. I look forward to it later. I don't think that there is a lot of good detail there, though. I'm going to guess. RALWRF, do all bronchodilators use albuterol? Can someone with asthma, bronchitis, COPD have a reaction to the albuterol, and are there easy to come by alternatives? Back in the day, it wasn't albuterol. They would use theophylline, which is not that far off from like caffeine. Basically, what you're looking for is something that's going to stimulate it. Epinephrine, can be used as a bronchodilator. Caffeine, I think, can be. Theophylline, obviously, would be. Now, those are not as easy to get, and they don't make them really in aerosol form that's better. But there are some other I was trying to say aerosolized, but I'm not going to get the word out. There are some other like inhalers that you can use. Cromolyn sodium was used back more when I was like earlier in practice as a preventive medication, especially for exercise-induced asthma. There are probably some options as well. Some of the even oral medications now can be used as a preventive medication. But for absolute acute, getting it there, albuterol is still sort of the most common. But, of course, there's levoalbuterol, which some people swear by. You should talk to your doctor. That's the enantiomer. Levoalbuterol is you get the one enantiomer of albuterol. So talk to your doctor. I mean, that's a question to absolutely ask your primary care physician or your pulmonologist. Can you have something else? Because there are lots of bronchodilators. There's certainly not just one. It's just that albuterol works so well and is so cheap. There you go. Tishalaba Verite, how solid is the research on long-term calorie restriction with the focus of improved health and longevity? Well, long-term calorie restriction is relative. If you're consuming way too many calories and you're obese, yes, eating fewer calories is probably going to help your life. If, however, you're eating a normal number of calories and you're healthy, trying to restrict it because you believe that makes people live way longer than they otherwise would, there's not a lot of evidence for that, and it doesn't make a lot of sense evolutionarily as well. It is not, there's no reason to believe that like when animals could not find food that they live longer. There's really just don't know about it. Of course, it's also not just calories, it's what are you eating? Eating donuts all day probably is not as good for you as eating other things that might be better for you. So this is one of those questions when I wouldn't get too, people get so hung up on food thinking it's like medicine. It's just not. And we worry too much about it. Eat a healthy, sensible diet. And don't look for the magic of food to make you live forever. And also don't, think that if whatever you're eating is going to kill you if you're eating a reasonable diet. End kicker. People are complaining about a large increase in their health insurance premiums and using that as proof that Obamacare doesn't work. Is this true? What are the factors that cause premiums to rise? Well, premiums go up because people spent more money on insurance the year before than the insurance companies thought they would. That's really the bottom line, and because they're always trying to adjust it. So asking about Obamacare as a failure, there's so much tied up in this. As I've said many times in the show before, the main goal of Obamacare was to increase access, to provide more people with health insurance that could otherwise get it. On that metric, it has succeeded. There are fewer people in the United States today who lack health insurance that want it, or who lack health insurance, period, than ever before, like in the history of the United States. So kudos, that's a win. People also think, especially supporters, that it's supposed to slow the rise of healthcare spending. And it has, I won't say it has, but healthcare spending has been rising more slowly. Why? We don't know. Watch a lot of our episodes on the topic. But there's no reason to believe that premiums were never going to go up again. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. Plus, you're talking about your private insurance. Yes, the premiums are going to go up. Premiums went up like 16% in the 80s, like year after year. It's like that. It's huge, healthcare spending. So premiums are still going up. Do I wish that the Affordable Care Act would slow the rise of premiums even more? Yeah. But I never believed that we were going to get that. Slowing healthcare spending entirely is going to be very, very hard and will require us to do stuff we won't like. And the Affordable Care Act doesn't force us to do that. Plus, people complain about their premiums going up. If you're talking about specifically in the exchanges, you got to go back and shop. As we say every single year, go back to the exchanges. It is true that your plan's premiums might have gone up, but another plan's premiums might not have. Maybe that's a better plan for you. Be a smart shopper. Every year, you must be a smart shopper. Go back to the exchanges, figure out what's the best plan for you, make sure you choose the best one. Brian Lou Sofaz regards the raw food movement. That's not a question, but okay. Is nutrient loss from cooking statistically significant? No. It's totally fine to cook your food. Not everything has to be cooked, but of course it's fine to cook your food. And again, this is we're fighting the wrong battles. The potential nutritional loss, if it exists between raw and cooked food, is so small. Why are you worried about it? Eat vegetables. That's what's important. Do I care whether your vegetable is fresh or cooked? No. I want you to eat vegetables. Worrying about if you're losing a tiny amount of some nutrient, which you're probably getting too much of anyway, because Lord knows you're probably taking supplements and multivitamins, is not important. Eat healthy food. I don't care if you cook it. Next question. Alan.tech. What's up, Doc? What's up with you? I have a 6-month-old who likes to watch Healthcare Triage with me, which got me wondering, what are the effects of screen time on an infant? Does it change as they get older? Huge discussion there. It's not, everybody lumps screen time in together. And the American Academy of Pediatrics just put out a new updated version, which got rid of the old, no screen time whatsoever argument and tried to make a more realistic argument about, being smart about what you watch. Healthcare Triage is not, it's not hyperactive. It's not cutting to thousands of things. It's me, especially when I watch Healthcare Triage Live, me on a screen talking. So, is that much different than, an education? It's educational. Is there any no, your 6-month-old's not getting any education out of this unless they like the sound of my voice. I won't say there's a benefit for your infant. That would be crazy. I don't think watching 6 minutes or 30 minutes or a time of watching Healthcare Triage with you, interacting with you while you're watching, is a net negative either, though. We don't have a lot of causal pathways to say what happens to children who watch stuff, also because there's so much different stuff. There's probably a big difference between watching frenetic cartoons and watching Healthcare Triage. There's a big difference between, watching something garbage TV, or what I would refer to my kids as garbage TV, on a screen versus watching something educational. No one's going to say that watching grandma or grandpa on Skype is damaging because it's on a screen. Obviously, human interactions, especially interactive ones, are meaningful no matter what. And, if you're doing it with your child, as a pediatrician, as a parent, as a person, I'm thrilled. I play games, I play video games with my children. We enjoy doing that together. And I think that the benefit of the interaction with kids outweighs whatever possible infinitesimal problems might come from watching stuff on a screen. So I wouldn't get that hung up on it, but I would probably argue that don't believe the hype that this stuff's like educational or like Mozarting your kid up. That's not happening either. We used Baby Einstein when I was a young parent with my wife, as a 29-minute break, because we were all by ourselves, no family in the area. I was a fellow, Amy was at home, and sometimes we needed 29 minutes to just have a break. And Baby Einstein did that. I was under no illusion that I believed that somehow it was beneficial to Jacob, but it kept the house going. And I don't think he's turned out the worse for it. Anyway, anecdotal. Kim Berkey, what's your opinion on egg donation? Are there risks I should know about before pushing this? Pursuing this? You should talk to your doctor. There are always risks to any procedure, but there's obviously benefits for donating eggs as well. So talk to your doctor, learn what the benefits and risks are, make a personal decision for yourself. 2 more questions because we're running out of time. Cleodel, what would potentially cause the pupils to rapidly dilate and contract, causing the scene you're looking at to rapidly darken and lighten? Well, big changes in lighting will cause your pupil to dilate and retract. That's one of the reasons the doctor shines the light in your eyes to see. If you're telling me it's doing it when light is stable, I would go get that checked out. I can't give you medical advice, but in stable lighting conditions, your pupils probably shouldn't be doing this. And if you find that they are, go see an ophthalmologist or a doctor. Mr. Mishra, are fats solid at room temperature and healthier than fats that are liquid at room temperature? Huge debate. Oh my God. Could do whole episodes on this. In fact, we probably have. The controversy years ago was that, everybody said, oh my God, we got to switch to margarine and stuff like that. The trans fats made everything solid. Then, of course, they became the devil. Everybody said go to the liquid fats. Of course, then they found out that cooking some of the liquid fats might be linked to cancer. And then they said, oh my God, go back to the solid fats. But the solid fats have food, and the solid fats have, trans fats and butter and the stuff that comes with meat, and that's going to give you heart disease, and don't do that. And now we're going up and back and up and back and up and back and up and back. I wish I had great answers for you. There's no randomized controlled trials. I have gotten to the point where it's I just think it's all in moderation. I'm not panicking and worrying about it. I think butter probably in moderation is fine. You don't want to overdo it. The fats, the naturally occurring trans fats that come in food are probably fine as long as you don't overdo it. You don't want to assume that everything in liquid form is better. Now, there's a lot of evidence, growing evidence that olive oil might be better than some other oils, and that certainly there's a difference between the monounsaturated or the polyunsaturated and the saturated fats. And there's still ongoing debate about that. I encourage you to watch all the episodes we've done on fats. I encourage you to read my upshot columns on these topics as well. The truth of the matter is that there's a robust ongoing debate, and that anyone who answers that they're totally sure what the answer is to this question probably isn't standing on nearly as strong footing as they believe. And so that is the best that I can do. Thank you so much for tuning into Healthcare Triage Live. I think links will be back on the screen again, maybe. Yes, here's all the stuff you should go to where we can get merch, including the mugs, including the posters. You can go to Patreon and become a patron and support us. And we're so grateful, as always, to all of our patrons that support us and allow us to do all this great stuff. You can go to the Facebook page where it's so easy to share all the videos and stuff that we do. You can go to the Reddit where lots of fascinating questions and a new community is building up. And every once in a while we pop on there and answer the questions ourselves. And as always, tune in on Mondays for the regular Healthcare Triage. Tune in on Wednesdays for Healthcare Triage Live. And Friday this week, as always, Healthcare Triage News. We may miss a little bit next week for Thanksgiving. So since we won't be doing live next week, have a happy Thanksgiving. But tune in otherwise for all the other episodes. We'll see you next time we do Healthcare Triage Live. Thanks a lot.